Welcome, everybody. Oh, look at everybody in here. 26 already. God bless you guys. Yeah, 3 days in a row. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that nice? Nice to have all of you here. Oh, I just want to give a shout out real quick to our dear Dave the Philippian, our regular contributor, donates $10. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of the support that you guys give. Thank you to those who join us for prayers. And let's see, what do we got going on today? Heat across the nation. It was hot up here in Montana. I think it got up to like 96. Today it's gonna be like 91 or something like that. I hate the heat, but at least it's a dry heat. I don't like humid heat. Yeah, it's nice to be in air conditioned places, but it's crazy. We had to do a lot of shopping at Costco and different stuff yesterday, and you forget what it's like outside, and you then walk out and you're like, and of course I've got a black car, and it gets super hot, so you gotta cool that thing off. Anyways, it looks like throughout the nation, Europe too, it's supposedly super hot. By the way, you want to hear something silly? Those songs I was playing on guitar, it wasn't a copyright, but it's when revenue share, because I actually played a song on my guitar, and I guess those songs are copyrighted. What's always funny too, I get something and it's like, that's not even the song that I sang. So that one's funny, but whatever. I mean, so what does that mean? I mean, obviously they don't get the super chats. It's whatever the ads would generate on that. Like, I've got to share it or something. It's ridiculous. You can't even play. I thought if you alter it, the sound of it, I can't remember. I mean, it's still obviously the person owns it as far as intellectual property. So I guess it doesn't matter. I guess changing the speed of it or something like that just makes it more difficult for the algorithms to pick up. But they've obviously gotten pretty good at doing that. Oh, I cannot stand humidity. I mean, I hate feeling sticky and dirty. And in humidity, it's always like you feel like you gotta take a shower 2-3 times a day. Like, who likes feeling sticky and dirty? That's what I don't. I tell you exactly what the songs that got me on. Just look it up real quick. Yesterday. Oh, don't say it. What if I told my mic? Well, I own all these words. You can't speak words anymore. I own them. I've intellectual. One has Kiko Dead Can Dance. I never played. I don't even know what Kiko is. So that one's incorrect. Content owner is Pius. Pias. Behind Blue Eyes. Got that. Norwegian Wood. Those are the ones they got me on. Kiko, the dead can dance. I just don't understand how that works. No singing. The only ones that aren't, that are old enough that I think, ones that obviously aren't owned or copyrighted, and then I think that, like, if a song's old enough, it becomes public domain. I'd have to look at the login, but it's crazy. Justin Henley asks, what's a transcendental argument for love? So remember, transcendental arguments in general is to take something that's accepted is fact. Oh, I want to give a shout out to Jack the Guitar God, $9.99. Thank you so much, Jack. It's to take something that people would accept exists. So whether that's sense experience, knowledge, beauty, love, morality, something like that. And then it seeks to find what are the necessary conditions that would make that possible. So it's a type of deduction in which it, and this is why it's reflexive, it deduces and it makes a deduction and concludes the necessary condition for, therefore, X. So obviously there's necessary conditions for love, and all of these are arguments for the existence of God. You could take anything. That's why Jade said you could start with pencils. What makes an object, the existence possible, identity over, an object has identity over time. What makes love possible? Well, love obviously has other conditions like persons, relations, stuff like that. And so we would conclude that the only thing that could actually give an account for a coherent account for that, justify that, and describe the appearances of that would be orthodoxy. Then you've made a transcendental argument for love. That's it. Justin Hanley, $5. Forgive me. I use transcendental for love is... Oh, that's funny. Corny pickup line. What's better than what's your favorite spider? What is the transcendental argument for spiders? Hey, by the way, Anthony, interesting question. I used to, when I let me tell you a story. So I spent 7 years in Ireland, as Crispy knows, living in Dublin. I did my master's and PhD. And when I returned, remember I might have told you the story that I had to start over. I had to apply for jobs, determine like what state I would live in. It was kind of a strange kind of feeling in time, being super excited that you finally finished this thing called the PhD and you awarded the doctorate, defended your thesis successfully. But it's a terminal degree. It's like you can't. There's a sort of kind of comfort of staying in academia, in school, that it's like, well, I don't really have to worry about getting a career or something while you're in academia. You work part-time jobs and stuff like that. But so you have a joy mixed with both a type of anxiety that, oh my gosh, I got to go back into the real world and get a job. And not only that, I got to start back over. Like, I got to go back to the United States, find a place to live. And, we didn't have really any money or anything like that. And so I didn't know what to do. I hadn't landed a job yet. And so there's some anxiety. And then my mother reached out to me and my aunt and uncle, and they were like, well, your grandmother, who I grew up with around the corner from me and spent a lot of time with my grandparents, so I love them very much. I was very comfortable, obviously, being around. My grandpa had passed, I think, what year was that? 2000, no, 1999, I think, or 98. So he'd been gone for a while, but my grandmother was still alive, and she was getting older, in her 90s, and um, they had to, my mother and my aunt obviously had to start thinking about, she can't care for herself, we're going to put her into, a home, but those are very expensive. So we worked out a deal. They were like, well, you can move in with your grandma and be her caretaker. I was also caring for my wife, who was disabled at the time. And so I was like, well, that's a great deal. Like, I remember growing up at that house, like, love my grandmother. And so we moved back to Garden Grove, California, and lived there as I took care of my grandmother. But my grandfather had like a shop, a wood and machine shop in the garage, which was like really fun. And so this is a long story to get to the question about icons. Um, One of the things that I enjoyed doing was just kind of fiddling with, the wood shop and doing different stuff. And I printed, or for example, if I have, the church, here's an example. Let's say you have like a calendar or something like that, or your church bulletin prints out, like here's a church bulletin, prints out something like this. What I was actually doing is I'd cut these out, and then I'd glue on a piece of wood. And I'm trying to think if I have any to show you. I'd glue on a piece of wood the icon. Well, I'd stain the wood, sand it down, stain the wood, glue the picture from the bulletin or a calendar or something like that, the icon of, and then I would take resin, and I'd coat it, and I would, I'd put the catalyst in there and hard, and then it gave that gloss. It would hard, like, and I made my own icons. So you could then have them taken to the priest and blessed. So that's fun. It's something you could do. It's free, and so, a lot of you don't know, most icons are actually just prints. Icons that are actually commissioned by an iconographer are quite expensive, so that's, most of the ones you even buy online are actually prints. So it's somewhat similar to. So great question. Anthony also asked, what's a good way to introduce your family who are Protestant to Orthodoxy? Oh, that's a really hard. Well, I can tell you what not to do. Don't argue with them. Don't push it on them. I think the best way is to focus on your faith and acquiring the virtues of the church, and if they're interested, they'll ask you questions, and so rather than proselytizing and kind of an act that'll never work. I mean, if it does, it's really rare with your parents because of the dynamic. So it's best to just focus on acquiring the Holy Spirit, and then thousands around you will be saved. They'll ask you. They'll see changes. And if they try to argue with you, you can say, look, I'm not here to argue. I don't think that would be edifying and fruitful. If you are curious about various things about the Orthodox faith, I'm happy to answer what the Orthodox, to my best ability, believe about those things, but I'm not here to have a debate or argument. That's keep those kind of boundaries, keep it focused on that. That's the best way to. All right, let's see here, more super chats. Good question though. No one's really, really difficult. Andy Moss, $4.99. Are there any books on tag from Orthodox perspective that you would know? There are not. Other than just immersing yourself, there's nothing that's going to be condensed that just addresses it. Like specifically, this is tag and this is this kind of, a philosophical epistemic argument for. Nobody's done that. It's all of the literature. That's all of the fathers. Like, you have to read that stuff. That doesn't mean that it's foreign from, but again, these aren't questions. Like, I saw somebody criticize my debate, some Orthodox person. I've seen this before and I'd like to address it. Oh, it's so stupid that Father Deacon Ananias, this guy, using 20th century analytic philosophy and language to, well, how dare, well, what a weird thing to say. First of all, do you believe that you can only use archaic words and there's no flexibility with? One of the strengths of Orthodoxy has always been its linguistic strength. As Father Russell says, it never had, like Rome, a linguistic imperialism that forced a language, like Latin, on. It adopted the language of the people. And furthermore, the flexibility of the language to even change the meaning of words, like hypostasis from ousia or substance to personhood, to specifically deal with new things and errors and questions that came up. So I find it weird, and we actually see, like you get with the Orientals, when you are unflexible with certain kind of language, and very rigid, you can actually run into errors. And so it's not Orthodox to Christian be like, how dare you use analytic language to, that's not in the fathers. Keep in mind that St. Gregory, the theologian, St. Gregory Nazianzus, had the same criticism of him. He was trained in philosophy, and he was being criticized that, well, Orthodox don't do philosophy. Philosophy's pagan. That's secular. How dare we? And this rises up in history once in a while, this kind of anti-intellectualism. And it's a fideism and fake moral piety. Orthodox just pray. How dare they use their God-given minds to answer, secular people and the pagans, and answer, philosophical critiques and stuff like that. That's bad. They were given the same criticism as St. Gregory Nazianzus, and he defended the goodness of philosophy, generally speaking, not a particular philosophy, but philosophy generally defined as a science or discipline of thinking correctly about all things, and the love of wisdom, and the virtue of logic and arguments that is grounded in the second, obviously the second person of the Holy Trinity is the Logos. And he had a line that says, a quote, "When speaking to the philosophers, speak to them in philosophies, that you may win the philosopher over." So the reason why I can use and be justified in using the language of 20th century analytic philosophy is to win the opponent over. And it's helpful too. One of the strengths about analytic philosophy was the kind of rigor of analysis and precision about like what words actually mean and how to kind of define those. So there's nothing wrong with that. So again, usually this comes up out of insecurity, that people feel threatened. It takes a lot of work. Analytic philosophy is very, very difficult. And I was talking with an Orthodox professor yesterday that specifically philosophy of language and theories of semantics is one of the most difficult philosophy that you can do. Which is interesting that Trent and Christopher have to hinge their entire argument on literally some of the most difficult philosophy and expect people to accept their position when they can't even... And you saw this too, that I guarantee you the arguments of theories of reference that we're going over flew over most people's heads. I knew that was going to happen, but I was, that's the language that they know and speak and the kind of rigor that they want. Like, I'm like, I could play that game. I've studied it. I have a PhD, and like, okay, I'll defend the Orthodox position using the language that you can understand, the philosophical language. So I think what happens is, because it flies over, the people say it's very difficult, takes many, many years to study, they feel insecure and threatened by it. So the way out is to, just like often, like fake moral piety. Orthodox Christians don't use their minds. Philosophy, I mean, that's from the devil. That's secular pagan. I just pray with my prayer rope. See, like, how stupid Father Deacon Ananias and these Orthodox philosophers are. I see it over and over again. It's just insecurity. It's like, look, nobody's saying you have to understand that, but like, just because you don't understand something doesn't mean that it's wrong. So I find that was an interesting thing that came up. Let's see. Anyways, I remember why I was bringing that, your super chat. So these kind of analytic kind of questions, I mean, nobody even, until you get to modernity, starts asking kind of epistemological questions. The way that, how do we overcome skepticism and these different things? You don't get till Kant is basically the first person to start asking at a kind of meta level. Well, we all accept that we know things and have sensitive, but nobody's really kind of done a deep dive analysis on a kind of meta-epistemic, meta-theoretic level of asking, what would the necessary conditions be to even satisfy that? And so this is why you don't get, specific literature about that. And that wasn't even a transcendental argument for the existence of God. Then you don't get specifically a transcendental argument for the existence of God until you get, and primarily this came, again, you have the argument implicit, but obviously through the fathers. So you can see it if you read it. You see that they're not doing what the Roman Catholics call natural theology. But you don't get it explicitly stated in the form that it is until the Reformed kind of Protestant apologists like Van Til and Bonson name the actual form. And I've argued too, obviously, I think Van Til even said that he got that from reading the Fathers. So it's not a Protestant idea, it's just they happen to actually name it and list it and put it specifically and explicitly into a form. And then it's not until obviously people like myself or Jay, who grew up in Protestantism and knew those arguments, who converted and started thinking about how the Reformed apologists present the transcendental argument for the existence of God and see how it failed. And then realize, well, obviously it's in the Fathers implicitly, and so this started a conversation specifically about presenting the Orthodox version of tag. I call it the AA, the apophatic argument, oftentimes. And so that's why these specific debates listed explicitly and precisely in the form that I talk about it just haven't existed. Like, that's why you're never going to find a book about so good question. And the other thing too, people have asked me, what's the Orthodox, does Orthodox commit to this, what's the Orthodox epistemology? Is it externalism, internalism, foundationalism? What's the Orthodox ethical theory? What's the Orthodox philosophy of mind? And that question is incorrect. It's formed incorrectly because it assumes that Orthodoxy is just another system, just another philosophy, and that it has to subscribe to one of these. And as Saint Father Demetrius Stanley says, Orthodox transcends any philosophical system. It's not a system. It's not a philosophy. You see this in the Fathers say it. Orthodoxy is not a philosophy. It's a way of life. It's a person, first and foremost, Jesus Christ, and a life with him, and learning the truths that transcend any philosophical system through a sacramental, incarnational, experiential life in community in the church. And once you start to get the truths about the faith, because you transcend over and above any system, you can certainly say, well, that philosophy has some truth there, said some true things there, and this other philosophy said some truth. There's something true about that. But you can't reduce God and divine revelation and the mystery of the person in life to a set of propositions or a system. Any more than you could reduce, your wife to, a book or a set of propositions. Persons transcend that. It's much more than, I can certainly say true things about my wife. I can't reduce her to that. So it's a Western mindset to want to reduce everything to propositions and systems, and it's actually kind of an inversion. Because propositions are abstractions from actual particular real experiences, real persons. And so what's primary is the actual person, the actual experience, the actual reality. What's secondary are propositions, philosophies, systems, etc., abstractions. And so the Western mindset is to think that the system, the propositions, the philosophy is more real than the thing they're derived from. And so to ask, is there an Orthodox book on that states what the Orthodox position is on mind and body and soul? It's like, no, like it's the whole corpus. Like there's no easy way to, maybe somebody will try to do something like that, but most of these things, you're not going to get a soundbite. You're not going to get, and this is, it's just a sort of intellectual laziness of all of us that, well, is there a video that just one video, is there one book that just covers this? And it's like, no, it's not how it works. You're going to have to immerse yourself in all the literature, where a kataholos, the entire life of, and then you get it. There's no easy way to answer these things. It's a very Western mindset and very, kind of contemporary mindset to be like, well, I just need one book that addresses this. This comes up in Discord all the time. Is there a book that it's like, no, there's no book that one book that deals with this. So there's no easy way to these things. But good question. I'm going through your questions. Well, let's talk about another philosophical thing that came up. Let me see if I can pop up. I had a blast playing bluegrass last night. It was really fun. After most people left, there was another old. I'm actually the youngest person in the group. We should call it the Boomer Bluegrass Band. That's really like, it's literally boomer. They're all boomers. It's amazing. I'm the only. Well, that's not true. There used to be. I haven't seen him for a while. There's another professor that I work with. He's in the theology department, and his name's Eric as well, but he's spelled with a C. Mine's a K, because I'm Norwegian. That's why. My parents gave me a pagan Norwegian name. He plays mandolin as well, so they have to call us Eric 1 and Eric 2, because this is really funny. Speaking about theories of reference, this actually happened at it's called String Beans, Beings, the band that I play with every Tuesday night. We ended up got mistaken and ended up referring to two different people, thinking it was one person. So think about this. We're both Gen Xers. We're both named Eric. We both work at Carroll College. We're both philosophers, and professors and we both play mandolin. And so it happened, even with natural objects, that they would talk to you and say, well, Eric, blah, blah, blah. And they're, well, who's Eric? Oh, yeah. They name all these. Oh, yeah, I know him. Talking about the other professor and not me. And vice versa. Isn't that interesting? Just kind of related to... Anyways, why did I bring that up? Oh. Why did I bring... Anyways, then they tried to add an additional property to distinguish and fix the referent by saying Eric 1 versus Eric 2. I got Eric number 2 because I said, well, that's not fair. I think I'm actually old. Shouldn't I be seniority? And they said, oh, seniority, he's been here long. I'm like, okay, fair enough. That's all right. First shall be last, and the last shall be first. I don't mind taking them, the second Joking. All right, let's see. Chris Golden, I'm praying for your cancer. May God provide you healing on that. We'll keep you in our prayers. All right, let's see. I'm going to share. This is interesting. I was going to address this yesterday and I got distracted. This is a old video, an Orthodox theory. Now, it was Lewis interviewing me from Orthodox Shahada about my older paper in Orthodox theory of knowledge. And this person says, the claim here is the transcendent monad cannot exist because there's no middle term to relate an infinite monad to a finite created world. But where's the logical contradiction there? The monad can do anything which is logically possible, but I don't see a relevant closed tree with the premise there is an infinite monad, there's a finite created world. If you add in 3, I have some knowledge of that finite created world. It seems omnipotent monad would have the power to make all those premises. Okay, so this is interesting. First of all, that's not my argument. I never said a transcendent monad doesn't exist because there's no middle term. And what I made was an epistemic claim. If God, and for the sake of the argument, whatever he may be, is a necessary condition for the possibility of knowledge, you have to be able to obtain that. And if, because of these antinomies, of the contrary opposite categories between infinite and finite, created, uncreated, right? If I obviously to obtain is a type of relation, and so I have to have some type of proportion or middle term in order to obtain. If I'm nothing like this, comes up in philosophy of mind with the mind-body problem. If you define mind by all the properties that are the opposite bodies, material bodies, then you have a mind-body problem. Because you want to say, like, well, I have a mind and I have a body, which is a relation, right? You're putting the two together, but I have no means of relating two opposite categories. So the argument that I've made is like that. And if you can't obtain, because of the way that you conceived of God, the necessary conditions, which is God itself, for the possibility of knowledge, then it makes knowledge, making claims about knowledge impossible. And so it's self-refuted. That was actually my argument. And I actually got this from, if we look, let's go here to newadvent.org, to the Summa. Part 1, question 2. Come on. Article 2. Objection 3. It's actually a really awesome objection by Aquinas. I don't think and I'll answer why I don't think he answers it correctly. So the objection to, so Aquinas is going to say God exists, and he's going to provide an argument, and then he obviously always tries to find the strongest objections to that. And question 2, Article 2, Objection 3, he comes up with an objection that God can't be proven, or not obviously known, because this could only be from his effects if God was proven. But his effects are not proportionate to him. Since he's infinite, and his effects are finite. So there you go. So he was able to realize exactly the argument I'm saying, that, okay, these are opposite. Infinite literally means not finite. So if I have to reason from effects to a cause, right, there's a relation, therefore, epistemically and logically between an effect and a cause. But if the effect, myself, or even the causal chain, is finite, I can't get to the opposite category unless there is a proportion between them. So just like we say, suppose I have some number A. A stands for some number, and B stands for another number. And they're incommensurate. This happens in mathematics all the time. For example, the number 1 and the square root of 2. I can't compare them, and that's not even opposite categories. It's just they're incommensurate. And so the proportion in mathematics to actually make that work is that you square each of those, so that 1 squared plus 1 squared equals the square root of 2 squared, and you square a square root, and it takes it away. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. So that's a mathematical proportion in order to relate things that would be incommensurate. So we would need, that's basically what he's talking about. We would need some sort of proportion to relate something that the infinite shares with the not infinite, i.e. the finite, if we're going to make that relation. But there is no proportion between those. They're literally opposite categories, therefore God can't be demonstrated. That was my argument. Now Aquinas answers, he just begs the question. From the effects, not a proportional cause, no perfect knowledge of that cause can be contained. And, well, how do we, he just posits this, but every effect of the existence of a cause can be clearly demonstrated. Well, how do we know that? You're just assuming. So it's just a hand wave. Don't, actually, just forget my objection. You just add, well, it's not perfect, you see, but it's like, those categories are opposite. We're not saying that, it assumes the exact thing you want to, that there is a proportion. It's just not perfect, but it's like, no, but they're opposite categories. That's what we're exactly looking for. And you just assume, we don't know that. Who told you that from every effect there may be a cause? That's the second one. We don't know that. You just assume it. Second of all, if they're opposite categories, I can't get to it. So it doesn't fall. That was my argument here. It wasn't that the monad doesn't exist, a transcendent monad. It's that if that were the case, I couldn't actually know that. And I couldn't make any, be justified in making any knowledge claims. So by impossibility, epistemically, you're saying that it's either you're just resort to skepticism, be like, well, I can't know anything, or that would be the necessary conditions. It was that it wouldn't simply just be a closed monad, an impersonal kind of object and force. And even if it was a person, you still need the energies, right? Because it's the energies that's the bridge. Furthermore, that's what's fallacious in Aquinas' argument, is that God is identical to being. Orthodox do not say that God is existence, but above and beyond. Okay? Existence is predicated. So God is not existence. So there's an opposite category. We do exist. We have finite existence. So how do I relate the two categories? The energies. Because being is predicated of the energies. And because God is his energies, it's the mean proportion that works. That's actually my argument. Here's another thing, too. I don't see the contradiction. Now, I want to point this out. This is really interesting. There's some weird thing going around that people think the only way that you could be wrong or something could be wrong is if it leads to a contradiction. Who told you that, first of all? Let me use an example. So, things can be factually wrong. Let's go over all the ways that things can be wrong and false. I don't know why I keep picking on the city of Dallas. I think it's because it was in a Philosophy of Mind book from John Searle or something. They used the example of Dallas being a city in Texas. So let's say somebody says it's not. So here we have a factual dispute. Either it is or it isn't. Now, what if somebody says, well, I just don't see the contradiction? Why does that have to result? You affirming that Dallas isn't a city. Why does that have to... You're just factually incorrect about that. Why do you have to produce a contradiction to you? Here's a second way. You could be semantically incorrect. There's some type of semantic dispute. You're confused on the meaning of a term, or number three, you could be incorrect in your presuppositions. So, for example, we see this in philosophy a lot. The argument presented is a perfectly sound argument. It's a valid argument with true premises, but yet it's wrong. Why? Well, what if it's founded on false presuppositions? Like there's no essences in the world, it's founded on nominalists or something like that. The argument's fine. It's formally speaking. Well, what if it doesn't lead to a contradiction? But it's not the only way that you could be wrong. Am I number 3 or number 4? I can't remember. Lost my train of thought. Could be contextually wrong, semantically wrong, factually wrong. Things could be wrong because they're logically incorrect. That does produce a contradiction. Number 5 would be an argument, kind of like what I was making, that, well, it could be wrong in the sense that if you were to assume that to be true, it would make knowledge impossible, or making statements about knowledge impossible. Does that lead to the contradiction? No. Now, I think that it's possible to actually formulate that into a contradiction. So I can often translate. For example, let's take a mathematics example. So I would also say that gentleman's argument begs the question. What's in question that needs to be proven is whether man can relate to God epistemically as a necessary condition if he's in the opposite category and there is no mean proportion, as Aquinas says, to bridge the gap. What does he say? Well, an omnipotent God could do whatever's logically possible. It's like, yeah, but that's what's in question. So then the burden of proof's thrown on me. Well, then you would have to prove that it's logically impossible. Now, I could argue that I don't have to do that, that you're making the claim. But let's go with it. Yes, I could translate that. So two things. Either it's just factually incorrect. You need a mean proportion to relate two opposite categories. You deny a mean proportion, therefore you're just wrong. Or I could retranslate that into a logical contradiction. Let's use an example of mathematics in terms of a geometric mean. I had already given you an example of particularly a Pythagorean theorem where the sides of a triangle are, with a right angle triangle, are 1, 1, and the hypotenuse is the square root of 2. And I cannot actually relate the sides to the hypotenuse in that mathematical form because whole numbers and square roots are incommensurate. So what do? I put a square, the area of and I take the area of that on the sides and compare that to, and make a logical or mathematical statement about the hypotenuse. Now, when I square a square root goes away. And so I have on a right angle triangle with the sides of 1, 1, square root of 2. The areas, now I can actually relate them by talking about the areas on that. So 1 squared is 1, and the square root of 2 squared, that area is 2. So 1 plus 1 equals 2. Okay. Let's do another one where I take obviously the square, the area of the square is the geometric mean in that example. Let's take another example, though, that how denying if a geometric mean is necessary to relate in a ratio or formula two terms, then the denial of it would lead to a contradiction. So let's say that I have I used A and B last time. A is to X, X is to B. In other words, mathematically, A is to X equals X over B, which implies that X squared equals AB, or X equals the square root of AB. Assuming A and B are greater than 0. Okay. So, in order to do that, I need some type of geometric mean, a mean proportional mathematically to do this. Okay. To show that this is actually a contradiction, you state the necessity. I'm going to assume here, and this is what a reductio. Let's assume, right, the necessary condition, or you state the necessity, and the reductio is you assume the negation of that. So if the necessity is the mean proportion that X equals the square root of AB, in order for that, then the denial of that actually does lead to a contradiction. So you state the proposition, and then you derive the contradiction, in which you're both affirming and denying something. So you would do the same thing with this. So I could do it. It's not the only way that something's wrong. So therefore, by impossibility the contrary, I cannot be justified in affirming there is a monad that has the problems of absolute divine simplicity, that is impersonal, that lacks, energies, etc. And if that's impossible to affirm that, then if the only other way is that God is a personal God who has energies, right, by impossible to the contrary, that must be the necessary conditions for the possibility. There you go. Pretty easy, right? Good question, though. All right, let's see if we have any more super chats. Now I know that I'm happy to take some tag answer. I know yesterday I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to play guitar. That's why. That's why I come. So what was the question yesterday? First of all, the necessary conditions that for the Orthodox tag, that which we say God, is not an axiom. Okay? It may serve like it, in certain respects. It's not an axiom. There's a couple problems with that we could talk about, and then we could talk about why isn't it circular? And what are problems with circularity? People really seem to get confused about circles. I'm gonna actually start using that too. If people just seem to lose their mind over circles and not be able to think correctly, suppose that you get pulled over by an officer. Son, why I pulled you over? No, you were speeding. And then you could do this. Oh, really? Look at my circle. I was not speeding. Look at my circle. Circles seem to confuse people more than anything. They have circle phobia. People lose their minds over circles. They are circle bigots. And you could probably get out of a speeding ticket by drawing a circle and be like, look at this circle. I was not speeding. Whoa. On your way, son. Isn't it interesting? Why is it people get so confused over circles? They lose their minds over circles. This week we will be doing a life hack into circle phobia. How can you break your PTSD of circles and rise to the top and reach financial epistemic success? Hi, I'm Father Deacon Ananias. Have you ever wondered, how do I get out of these circles? Well, I have some good news for you. Circles are not something to be afraid of. And with my 5-step financial epistemic plan, you too can find yourself managing your circles in life. How about that? How about I sell courses on... Would you buy it? Yeah, notice there's nothing wrong with circles. What's known as premise circularity is what is actually incorrect. And well, why is it incorrect? Because your book said so? Those fall under, what we would call vicious circularity. They're an informal fallacy. Not formal, an informal, under weak induction. What is induction? As an argument. So if you look in a logic book on fallacies of weak induction, it means that the premises are not strong enough, they're weak, to establish the conclusion. Okay. So it puts question begging, petitio, and vicious circularity in those, not because going in a circle is a sin, a logical sin, but because when you use premise circularity, it's not strong enough to establish the conclusion. So an example of this would be if it was simply just a premise or proposition. Proposition is a sentence that has a possible truth value of either true or false. Okay. If you simply restate the premises as a conclusion, either just restated or word it slightly in a different way as to create the illusion that you're not doing that, and that's what a fallacy is creating the illusion that a bad argument's actually good. Obviously, a premise alone is not enough to support the conclusion just as a premise. Does that make sense? So the question's always, does something do the work? So it's not that circularity is bad, because suppose you've got a couple different options. Either there's no justification for a premise, a proposition, a position that you have, just arbitrarily, like, in which case there's no knowledge, there's no argument to be given, no justification. The premise is supported by an infinite chain of other premises, so on and so on ad infinitum, in which case there's no justification. Or you simply just restate the premise, in which case that's what we would call vicious circularity. Well, it's obviously not strong because that's the thing that's in question, and the premise itself couldn't do. All right. So suppose but the question is, well, then it seems necessary we have to have some first principle, an epistemic principle that does do the work. Most people realize this. If you do get it, so before going into the details, so people know that, like, well, we're looking for a first principle term, epistemic principle. If it's first, it's not known by any other means. Self-sufficient. It's that by which everything else is known. That's just definitionally true. That shouldn't be problematic. Otherwise, we're back into that Agrippa's trilemma. If you have to justify that then you're in the ad infinitum, and you're either go back to the original support is, well, it's just the premise restated again, or it's arbitrary, just posit it, no justification, or I just restate it and I'm going in a vicious circular. So the question is, of course, then it would imply that there is a first. There would need to be. Then the question is, well, people putting all kinds of first principles forward as candidates. The question is, does it do the work? So, again, it might be a level of circularity. Let's say it does do the work. If it's not known by anything else, because it's the thing by which everything else is known, then even the thing itself being known as the first principle, it is the principle by which is known. Now, I call that reflexivity. I don't call it circularity, but it's a sort of self-reference. But for something to be reflexive or self-referential in and of itself is not bad. So get that out of your head. And maybe it's just helpful for you to, if you don't understand that, if you get confused, stop confusing yourself. Stop using questions about circularity. But circles on a piece of paper, self-reference in of itself, words refer to words in describing the meaning of words. Logic is going to refer to logic. Meta-epistemic and meta-theoretical questions are going to refer to nobody in their right mind thinks that's problematic. Question is, well, what are you doing with it, and does it do the work? Is it a weak inference or is it a strong inference? Does that answer the issues with... It's absolutely amazing. I've never seen... It's like a honeypot, you know, where they set up the guy committing the crime with a prostitute, and he, you know, puts the lady right, and then in terms of espionage, they do this all like draw that. It's like that's what it like. You want to like draw somebody and start and get them all confused. Talk about circularity. Well, I don't understand how the tag's not so. It's like, I mean, I get it. Forgive me for not being paid. It's just when you have to deal with, like, say something a million times, it gets actually quite frustrating. What was the other point I was going to make with that? Shoot. Something to talk about tag. Alright. It'll come back to me. What questions do you have? Karl Popper. Have you ever heard of you've heard of Karl Popper, but did you know his logical doppelganger Karl Popper? It's a falsification principle. I bet most of you are familiar with. Somebody mentioned Popper in there, that's why. Alright, somebody has a question here. Joke story. What is the Orthodox views on miracles of saints, specifically saint? Well, first of all, we don't call them saints. Those outside of the church are not, even if they lived a virtuous life and believed in God, are not given the title saint. So we would never say Joseph Cupertino is a saint. We don't call Aquinas a saint. Those are after the church is split, and people in Roman Catholicism after the split are not given the title saints. Furthermore, anything outside of the Ark of Salvation, the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, that's the Orthodox Church, is held with suspicion. So if you have an ark or a ship, what's outside of the ship? Treacherous waters, dangers, storms. It's a place where you can drown. Now, can God reach you outside? Yes, and he can bring you into the ship. So, do miracles happen outside of the church? Of course, we have to affirm that. Because if they didn't, none of us would convert. There'd be no converts. Conversion itself is a miracle, in which God, you're out and the treacherous sea sinking like Peter, and Christ brings you in and saves you. Can God save you outside of the ark? Of course, but he's in the ship reaching out and saving you. And that's very rare. He's calling you into the ship. Whether there will be anybody saved outside of the ark, I don't know. Like, we don't... Is it logically possible? Yeah, of course it's logically possible, but it would be rare and it would not be a normative means. What's prescribed is get into the boat. Do miracles occur outside of the church? Yes. But you judge something by its fruits. Like, does the miracle lead somebody into the ship? Or does it lead them into a false religion? And we could approach the same thing. What if somebody came to you and say, well, I've seen, what do we make of these Hindu yogis doing miracles? Like, what would you say? You'd probably hold it with suspicion, but like, I guess it's possible. But signs and wonders, apart from correct doctrine, I mean, St. Paul warns about this, are meaningless. Right? That's like, okay, so somebody can do a sign and wonder. A Hindu yogi can do signs and wonders. Occultists do signs and wonders. So that's typically what we would... It's not sanctioned. It's outside of the church. It's held with suspicion. Could be demonic. It could, we would call, prelist. Let me give you an example of this. So you ever watch these ghost shows where some house is haunted? Obviously, we know they're like, if it's real, legitimate, it's obviously a like demonic presence in. And so they bring in this new age person, and they've got their crystals, and they got their sage. They start burning the sage. What they don't do is bring a priest in and do exorcism of the house and blessing of the house. So, what happens? The demon goes away. Oh, wow. What does it cause the new age person holding their crystals and the sage breaths to think? My false religion of new age and sage, this really works. So, the demons accomplished exactly why they were there. They did a miracle. And they got the person into spiritual delusion and prelust of thinking that their faith in whatever system is what actually is the real cause of that. This is also comes up in the gospel story of the lunatic boy. That the demons, so the lunatic, right, lunar, the phases of the moon, superstitions began established, in antiquity, that the moon makes you crazy. Phases of the moon, a full moon. It was a superstition. It was a false idea. Now, the demons love to get you away from the truth and look over in something that's false. So what did the demon do? Because the lunatic boy is possessed. It's not the moon that's actually causing him to go crazy and have convulsions and fall into the water and fire. It's the demons doing it. But the demons only chose to do that on the full moon, on the phases of the moon, to get the people to what? Believe that it's the moon that's causing, and believe in a superstition. They were under delusion. So probably most of the things we would say is probably like that. That they're either self-produced delusions, mass delusions, they're false, or they're demonic. If they're not leading somebody into the Orthodox Church and getting them to believe in, sage crystals, the full moon's effect, or papism, then obviously it's a demonic influence at some level. Now, we also say it's possible that genuine miracles do happen. People are just not responding correctly to coming to the Orthodox Church. So that would be our position. And it's outside the church, so we just don't speculate on that. We just know most likely that's probably what's going on. Yeah, I mean, you could use anything there's no medium that's like required as other than, if it's stable enough in terms of practicality, like that's fine. And then you can have any image blessed. Yeah, Bill Hooks, why don't we just ask people, like, well, from your position, why is circularity and question begging bad? I'd love for you to... Oh, because we all agreed on it? Oh, because you do... Well, wait a minute. I have an answer for that. Well, my specific question is asking, from your worldview, why is that bad? Well, I'm doing an internal critique. Well, that just presupposes that internal critiques are valid, too. From your position, you can just keep moving it back, but, like... It begs... Right? The thing that you're saying you can't do begs a question itself about begging the question and internal critique. That's what's in question. I'd love for you to explain from your materialistic, atheistic world of accidentalism why that's wrong. Well, I'm doing an internal critique and showing that you're logically being inconsistent. Again, why would logical... What if I just changed and be like, well, we changed our mind and logical inconsistency is a epistemic virtue? I mean, this is just stupid. The whole thing is you can't give an account from an atheistic worldview of accidentalism why any of this stuff is epistemically virtuous or vicious. And why we, and the normative, why ought we to... So that's why itself is played. What is, again, a fallacy? It's giving the illusion that what you're saying or the argument that's bad is actually good. And if it's an illusion, it's a magic trick. It's it's sorcery. That's why there's always something, demonic about. Well, don't look at the... This is what happened in the debate. I think that's going on typically happens in Roman Catholicism. What's immediately evident, or should be, right? There's various reasons why it might not. What is patently true or false may not appear that way to you. We could talk about that, but what Roman Catholicism is notorious for doing is separating what's actually going on in reality from the actual arguments that they're giving. And it's like, well, don't look at that. Let's look at this abstract propositions that I made in this whole philosophy. Is the philosophy and the system that I'm talking about correct? And, well, not if... It's meaningless. It's just a fantasy between your two ears. If it doesn't correspond to anything in reality, it's just a vacant fantasy between your two ears. An empty concept. And part of this, too, is a sign of kind of modernity. That, again, the abstract becomes more real than the actual real. I mean, think about even the switch between Aristotelian logic to Boolean, logic. It just starts looking at rather than truth and the immediate now, and imminent truth and experience, they start with well, we just can't know that, so let's just look at these formal, I'll just analyze truth in terms of just formal sets and logic and language. And so you just get locked into your head. You're literally in unreality. You're divorced from... And that's basically modern philosophy. It's just... And so... Let's give an example. The last pope blesses same-sex couples. Now, we all know his views on same-sex and Skittles and stuff like that. If you don't, then there's something you obviously have things that are making you not see the obvious. Okay. So then what do the Roman Catholics do? They abstract, and rather than looking at the actual situation, which is the contextualization for what he said and what's been going on in the Roman Catholic Church, well, let's just analyze the statement, and could we analyze it logically in a way that it doesn't mean that, and then I'll justify that's what they did. Well, that's not really what the word means. Let's just look and go into this analysis of language, and it doesn't really imply. It's like you can't do that. Like, you can obviously see you divorced it from reality in the context that gives that actually meaning. I think the same thing has happened with do Muslims and Christians worship the same God, in which they argue in the affirmative. We know what's going on in the papacy, what has been. It's not simply a proposition that we're analyzing. It's what's actually happening in the church that's called the Roman Catholic Church. So what do? The last two scholars, Trent and Christopher, go into some of the most complicated philosophy, i.e. theories of reference and philosophy of language, and be like, well, let's just look how references work, and don't look over here. Look at my beautiful system of theory of reference I took from Frege and Kripke. I have this Kripkean kind of view of that negates the earlier Bertrand Russell view of correspondence. Now we can obviously see how this could be a rigid designator, and that referencer is like it's like, and people get caught up and confused over that's the game. And it takes a level of kind of virtue and discernment to see what's actually going on. So it's an idolatry. They're worshiping systems and abstract thoughts and propositions, thinking they're more real than what's actually happening. It's like, but everybody can see that. Now, why can't you see that? Because I bought into that's the way that you do things. You just have this scholastic abstract approach where you're going to argue while the house is burning up, how many angels can you get on the tip of a pin? And you should see it. You should, if you have discernment, you should be like, I see what's going on. That's a type of semantical sophistry. It's an illusion. It's a distraction. And again, you're telling me in order to defend your position, you have to in order for everybody to see the truth of your position, they're going to have this level of knowledge of analytic philosophy and philosophy of language and theories of reference. That's the same. Now, I go into it because I'm defending the position against, and I can explain that, but, I'm kind of common sense here. It's like, of course I know that I don't have to do that. That you should be able to see that, like, it's clear we're not referring to the same God. We're not worshiping the same God. What did I state? Made my own quote of myself. Talk about self-reference. In my Reason for Reason, the second to last paper that I wrote and presented at the philosophy conferences, is the hardest problem is convincing people the problem isn't hard at all, but easy. You're making it difficult. And then I've got to come in and, I learned all these theories that are extremely difficult just to answer what you made the simple so difficult. That's really what's going on. And yeah, Jacob, that's correct. Even if they find, like, if you point out a contradiction, they're not at a systemic level, they're not going to abandon it. It's not like, oh, dang, yeah, that's... Here, let's cover my bud, Shane Swenson. Not only a dear friend, I want to support and give a shout out to Shane. Not only a dear longtime friend, but our iconographer for Holy Trinity, our parish, and Butte, Montana, which we commissioned him to. He's almost done. I mean, it's amazing if you go into the parish that it's almost all filled in from the damage. But let's see. He's probably talking about St. George the Martyr. So this is at our parish right here. This is the side door. So over here would be the altar and stuff like that.
Hey, I thought I'd make a quick video of some of the progress that I've made here at Holy Trinity Serbian Orthodox Church in Montana. This is, well, you can probably see size comparison. There's my dirty hand. It's paint, I swear. St. Demetrios.
St. Demetrios, sorry.
And up here, we have St. Constantine and Helen. And then this is actually an interesting roundel.
Oh, weird. I just got turned around. It's actually the other... That's really weird, but the video... I thought I was looking south, and we're actually looking north. Now, this is the founder of our holy parish at Holy Trinity, St. Sebastian of Jackson. So, most people didn't know that he just put this. So last Sunday I was pointing that out prior and after liturgy. I'm like, look, there's our saint, the founder of our parish, which is 127 years old.
Medallion, if you will, that I painted. I actually finished that today. That used to be St. Herman of Alaska, but we decided to change it up a little bit and put St. Sebastian Dabovic. Sorry, Serbian bros. Anyway, the reason why we decided to, when I say we,
so
I mean
this is looking north.
The parish priest, and me, I guess, but the parish priest is his idea. The reason why we decided to take St. Herman down and put him up is because St. Sebastian founded this parish, and it was consecrated by St. Tikhon of Moscow. So, yeah, St. Sebastian, this is the church that he started. It's kind of weird for me to be doing the iconography in a church that was founded by St. Sebastian, but here we are. And I painted him holding, this is the parish that I'm in right now, and Father Russell, the parish priest, wanted St. Sebastian, founder of Butte. Now he wasn't the founder of the city of Butte, but that's what is said in the liturgy pertaining to this parish. So we decided to keep it what is said in the liturgy, but that's St. Sebastian.
That's awesome.
And I finished that today. Anyway, there's St. Herman. We didn't just totally take him down. St. Herman is actually he was on the wall twice. So he's over on the east side here. So anyway, and then there's the Theotokos that I finished a couple weeks ago.
Isn't that great? Good job, Shane.
These murals, I sort of did some work.
So that's the last where you can see the
my own composition
stucco there. I mean
the
plaster.
Anyway,
so Nicholas
this I did a couple years ago. St. John Damascene, and I still have to do the inscriptions for St. Cosmas here. So I'm going to do that tomorrow. But anyway, I added St. Nicholas here, and then I think I shared St. Basil of Ostrog and Ostrog, whatever. I'm an American. I don't know how to say them fancy, learned ethnic words. But anyway, and then St. Gregory here. Again, size comparison. I'll put my dirty paint-covered hand up. These are really fun. I love painting these full figures. Super fun to paint. And then I added these three as well. So, anyway, this is what I've been working on the last couple weeks. I'd say this is probably about from here. All this up here was all empty, all the way across there to St. Demetrios. I painted that in approximately, I'd say 3 weeks. 3 weeks of actual painting time. That doesn't include my trips home and whatever. So anyway, thought I would give you an update if you're interested. And we're almost done with this project. I got a little bit more to do up here, and then this 3-year project will be coming to an end. So
3 years, can you believe it? So thank you, Shane. Big shout out. Now watch what's so hilarious. This Protestard comes on.
Hey, I thought I'd make a quick video of some of the progress that I've made.
death defeated. Death hath no power. Have you studied Leo the Third, obviously Pope Leo, and how his son's wife, again, you need an apostrophe there because it's possessive, became the first female king. You mean Empress Irene is not a king. It's an empress. And overturned iconoclasm. She was in bed with Rome. Shane's like, well, what's your point? And I'm like, well, Rome was Orthodox at that time, so what's the problem? I find it very intriguing, curious, your input. I've been looking to Orthodox churches. I find it interesting Easterners banned them for a while and had a solid argument for doing so. A solid argument? Well, it begs the question. Yeah, the robber councils. The Council of Herrera. Yeah, they were like, are you shocked that there's heretics in the church? Oh god, dude, look at this. Guy thinks Pope Leo had a son. The amount of yeah, exactly. The amount of stupid drive-by comments I get from random kids is legend or legion. Interesting play on words there. Nature of the beast here. Yeah. I mean, this is so sad. Shane isn't out there arguing and doing apologetics and stuff like that for people to come on and like give him hate and do a drive-by. I'm not going to take time to respond to iconoclast. I've done the argument over and over again. I mean, so what's the argument? Like, you had heretics in the church, you had robber councils that were overturned and not received. I mean, that's your argument? That there were iconoclasts that exist? Well, the bird person you approve on, well, okay. First of all, those people are a lot closer to, and you don't have to have everything written to be true. That's part of what, so notice you're outside, you're a modern person, well, if I don't see the evidence written down at the arbitrary date that I want, then it didn't exist prior to that date. Well, that's just, first of all, erroneous presupposition. Oral tradition and the way it was maintained is prior to writing. So you can't be like, well, I need the writing prior to writing to guarantee the what you're actually. I mean, it's just literally a contradiction. So they were appealing, and there is writing. There are arguments appealing to, right, and the oral tradition as well. None of which you have any ideas like about. I asked this guy if he knows about the apostolic canons, which were actually the teachings of the apostles and then later written down in the 4th century after, on the Edict of Milan, when obviously Christianity was legalized and you could, put these things into writing without threat of. But the saints defending icon dualism, the love of icons, were referring to making these arguments. They're referring to both a written and oral tradition. Number two, suppose that didn't even exist. There's the arguments. Think about the philosophical and logical arguments presented in the Seventh Ecumenical Council and by St. John of Damascus. That's enough to refute your stupid Muslim position. Talk about this. Now you got Protestants are Islamic Trinitarians. Like, that's. But like, so what? So you can't find evidence. Like, your position is literally anti-Christological. just on philosophic grounds, we can refute your dumb, stupid position. So congratulations, you could be a Jew and Muslim. Because you're so dumb and can't... I'm tired of it. I'm tired of actually having to deal with stupidity over and over. Here we go. So what's so stupid about this? Saint Dionysius the Areopagite. All of the ones that are actually legitimate fathers, you have 2 heretics in here that apostatized from the church. Let's see. Oh, this guy's actually correct. I thought this was the... What's funny is, forgive me, I misjudged this guy. There's a similar one quoting actually Tertullian and Origen, some of these others. Just like this. It looks exactly where they're referring to pagan idolatry in their statues, right? And they take that to, oh, well, see, they're talking about icons in the church and like, but this is actually good. This actually shows, and it's probably done on purpose, where they pick the exact same people to actually show. Remember this guy saying, well, there's no evidence of St. Dionysius, the earliest 107. Like, you can find it if Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, etc. So good job. So forgive me for rushing to judgment there, everybody. But yeah, let's give the like on that. Yeah, man. All right. Let's see what you guys are saying in light of that. Over this a million times. What is it that we notice about heretics? There's no amount of evidence, no matter how clear or how awesome the arguments are, that they will not reinterpret, right? So it's a non-falsification. So everything, nothing be evidence against my position. Everything's evidence for it. Why? Because you have free will and you have moral vices and also intellectual erroneous presuppositions that cause you to reinterpret everything to be like, well, I'm always right. And isn't that interesting? Why is that actually a sin? You know, it's not a sin to get an answer wrong on a math test. So what's going on here? The sin, the one unforgivable sin is what? Blaspheming the Holy Spirit. And it's the type of person that you become incorrigible, unwilling to repent. If repentance is necessary for salvation, if you get yourself in a position where you become a sort of person who is unwilling to ever repent. Now, how do you get that? Well, you're always right. I'm always right. Now, that's not an intellectual problem. That's a spiritual and moral problem. Right? This is why heresy is a road to perdition. It's a very dangerous place to be because it's not an intellectual error. It's a spiritual and moral error that's very dangerous. I will always, no matter how much great your argument is or how clear the evidence is, I will always think that it's proving my position, and I'll reinterpret it because I'm always right. I am the great I. Do you see? It's antichrist. It's elevating themselves above God. It is the pride of Lucifer. I am who am. I am always right. Do you see that? Peter, 1399 Canadian. Thanks for addressing my question about the monad. Oh, that was you. Right on, dude. I agree the monad suggestion could be wrong, but I'm still not convinced that either God is necessary for knowledge when the monad is viable. Well, then you'd have to give an account. That's a knowledge claim, right? And again, like I said, There's no way that you can affirm there's a monad. If we're persons, right, we're not objects or essences, how do we relate to something that's impersonal? So the problem with the monad, so even if I grant that you didn't have the problem of the mean proportion, because you're making a claim to relate the two. So you need a proportion between two opposite categories, of which you haven't provided. In fact, as I showed in the mathematics, you can actually derive arithmetically, geometrically, a contradiction from that. So it actually does lead to a contradiction, as I showed. Again, this just seems to be, forgive me for saying this, not to be rude, Peter, fallacy of am I blanking? I blanked on the word. This is frustrating. I can't believe I just forgot. Let's just look up real quick. What? Incredulity. Well, I can't understand how that's possible, therefore it's like, but that's not an argument, it's literally a fallacy. So you couldn't understand what I was saying with the argument from mean proportion. Like, that's not an objection to, just, you literally just stated you just don't understand something. Number two, also concern relation. No, let's say I grant you that. The monad is simply just a cause, right? This is almost kind of like Neoplatonic or, even Aristotelian. A cause cannot be a sufficient condition for knowledge. I mean, a necessary or sufficient condition for... Why? Because I could do brain surgery on you and cause you to believe something. And as Donald Davidson says, a cause is not a justification because a cause doesn't explain and tell you why and how something is. It just determines you to believe. But if I can determine you to believe something false, i.e. a cause could determine false, then that can't be a justification and cannot be a necessary condition for knowledge. I assume it's a necessary condition of knowledge, so you let into contradiction. I'm both assuming and denying something at the same time. The thing that can't be a necessary condition actually is a necessary condition. So that's... so because it's not just a causal interaction, it must be personal, right? As opposed to objects or essences. That's why monad's ridiculous. No, I'm not assuming. None of these arguments make... I mean, Aquinas was presented this argument. He, like, internalism and externalism didn't exist. So obviously you can understand this without committing yourself to some theory of internalism or externalism. And by the way, internalism wouldn't reject internalism still has like a causal, like it just doesn't cash everything out in terms of... But again, even if I assume eternalism doesn't get me out of this. So suppose only reasons can be justifications for... So you're telling me that in order for me to see this problematic that a brain surgeon's causing me to believe 2 plus 2 equals 6, I have to be an eternalist? Like, that's insane. You're just repeating the same thing over and over again. How do I know the infinite monad cannot relate to finite? How can you not understand this? You have two opposite categories. Have you not heard about the mind-body problem? I just gave countless examples in mathematics where it's not even opposite categories. Just incommensurate. And you can't relate the two. So, you simply saying how it can't, like, that's not an argument. I literally proved to everybody. You're assuming what you want to prove. Also, what does good mean? What does omnipotent mean? You're not going to be able to figure these things out apart from divine revelation. You're literally just positing that, first of all, omnipotent doesn't mean it can do whatever he whatever he wants. Omnipotent, whatever is possible. So if it's, as I proved, logically, even mathematically necessary, because we're getting possibility, that there's a mean proportion between opposite categories in order to relate them, then God, right, can't do the impossible. That's what omnipotence means, logically impossible. But if God's omnipotent and all good, he can do the thing that I say that's actually in question that I just proved to you is logically impossible. Yeah, I don't know why people... And again, tell me how you're going to figure out any of this thing apart from divine revelation from natural theology. Furthermore, all of this presupposes autonomous, that it's possible, apart from divine revelation, to actually make any claims. But autonomous epistemology, even if you're a theist and believe, means that, is it possible that God doesn't... Can I assume in my argument it's possible God doesn't exist and then later prove him as a monad or something like that? Then it's possible that accidentalism is possible because that's what God isn't. So you just refuted yourself. So, like, before we even get into the details of that, you literally have no justification. You have a defeater even to say, make any epistemic claims about any of these terms whatsoever, because you just admitted that apart from divine revelation, it's possible for me to make these claims without assuming the God of divine revelation. But then that means it's possible, in order for me to argue that God doesn't exist, i.e. accidentalism is possible, but accidentalism is defeated from knowledge. So your autonomous position about all these things is actually a defeater for any epistemic claims. So that's the best argument. You're never going to get out of that. All right, moving on. Find the stream today. Yeah, to be honest, I probably won't look at your video. Like, it's just not sophisticated enough. The argument's not going to be sophisticated enough for me to... I got to do a lot of stuff. That's why I don't take on every single debate that's like... I got a time prioritization of priorities in life. Like, I don't respond... Like, I don't mind, taking a few minutes out to let everybody know how the argument fails and stuff like that. But, like, you know how many emails I get, like, Father Deacon Ananias, can I send you my response video or, 20-page paper on? And it's like, I have to prioritize. Jake, if you're out there, so let me give you an example. That's why I took the debate offer between Dr. Trent and Dr. Christopher Tomasweski. Forgive me, Chris, if I mispronounce your last name. Because they're professors of philosophy. They have published works and stuff like that. Would be worth my time. I just don't have time to respond to every, other than maybe something real quick, even if that in this. If you want to publish this in a peer-reviewed journal or something like that, that might actually, if you have this analyzed by other philosophers or something like that and published, I might do something like that. For example, even before that, I still have a duty to, for example, Jake, if you're out there, gave me your paper on using grad school on the Gettier problem. I still have to get, so I have a bunch of stuff to do prior to my wife, prior to my own research, building the courses for the semester and all my parish. So, to be honest, I'm not going to, watch it or read it. So forgive me. It's just time management. Especially after, I'm like, you're not going to be able to get... there's just, things that I'm like, I might be wrong about this. I might look at somebody's, I don't think I am, but I might, and then there's other things that's there's no way that this, I know this argument inside and out well enough that, you're not going to... I'm not going to be wrong about it. So why waste my time with... So, hope that's not offensive, but just, everybody's got, just types of practicalities. Snow cookies, $5. Question on causality in the chat. Calling all causality. David Hume's critique about causality, okay, is so again, it's operating on, kind of prior presuppositions that by the time you get to Descartes, you have an abolition of real essences. Those essences, right, in terms of Aristotle's four causes, which are not kind of the causality we're talking about there, but there was there was also the efficient cause, was able to, if they were true, if you could affirm the essences existed, provided a metaphysical grounding for causality, because you don't see essences, right? But they provided the metaphysical grounding. Essence is what you understand. They provided the metaphysical grounding for kind of causal laws. So once you get rid of that, then you are restricted to... So Descartes leaves you with just matter, minds and matter. And then this leads into, a critique of Descartes' rationalism that leads into empiricism. Well, the only thing that we could actually know is our immediate sense experience. And so, but if that's possible, right? If that's true, you don't sense and experience causality. So, in fact, it's just an assumption. Causality is a thing that you unjustifiably assume that's going on in the world, but you don't see it anywhere, you have no justification for it whatsoever. But if there is no... So this is my point to Peter. Causality cannot be a sufficient condition, and so the monad would just be sufficiently conditioned, but it isn't necessary. There obviously has to be causation in the world. Otherwise, I can't conclude from effects to causes about anything. And that's necessary for knowledge. Also, scientific knowledge too operates on like causal natural laws. Okay, so therefore, I have no justification. All that I could really say is one dang thing happens after another. Okay, but that's just a chronological. It doesn't tell you the thing prior is caught. Like, you just erroneously assume that. So we use that. Now somebody might go, well, it's grounded in the monad or these forms or something like that. But that just begs the question and pushes it back farther. Well, how do we know those exist? I mean, you're making a knowledge claim for, and then we can rehash the whole problem. I mean, there's many different ways to refute the monad. Okay. First of all, there is, it's not personal and it has to relate to persons. Okay, so, God has to be, that's the whole argument for the Trinity. Number two, it assumes autonomous epistemology. Autonomous epistemology is self-refuting because it admits the possibility of what's impossible, i.e. accidentalism, so it logically contradicts and says, I affirm the necessary condition and deny it at the same time. Bam. Number three, the lack of proportionality between being and infinite and the finite that leads to the contradiction. And then also begs the question. Number four, I always lose my... it is vicious. It leads to the Agrippa's trilemma. It's either vicious or circular. It goes on to... Again, so it just ends up being... They're just either are everything about the... Well, think about... Let me put it this way, Peter. If my made-up story that I just made up is true, then that would explain my made-up story and why it's true. How about that? But that's what's in question, is whether it's a monad or some... Yeah, but if it's true... So you don't get anywhere with that. And that's the problem with autonomous epistemology. You have the problem, none of which can overcome any of the skeptical challenges. And that's what's so great about David Hume. Your thing assumes that causality even exists. You have literally no justification without either arbitrarily asserting it or going in a vicious circular. Or on an infinite, well, because of this, because of this, because of that. So that's, what am I, number 6. Number 7. Oh, modal collapse. Necessary creation. And then also the causal argument that if it's simply, forms of the monad is just an efficient cause of knowledge, then it's a defeater for knowledge. So regardless of the fact that it could produce something false in you, a cause can never be a cause is not a logical... This is Donald Davidson's. And I might take... It doesn't mean I assume internalism, but the point is true. How can a non-doxaxic, non-logical cause relate to... It's the same problem of proportion to the opposite category. Doxaxic, logical... That's Donald David. So he's got a point. Does it mean all of internalism is true? No. But you have the same problem report. It's a great argument, actually. Doesn't make me an internalist any more than a Humean to be yeah, Hume's right there. You can't actually justify that from your position. So those are 7 arguments right there that refute. When you walk... So, correlation is not causation. Isn't this the problem? They could just be temporally... You're assuming what's in question. That one's the cause of it. So suppose... Every time I walk into the room... the prior event to that is the secondhand moving on the 5 of the. Suppose it appears to me that the 5, because every time it happens when I walk in, that the movement of the second hand is actually causing me to move into the room. That would be erroneous. So it assumes what's actually in question. That simply because something follows after, that therefore it's because of this. And that's actually a post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. Post after this hoc, propter in Latin because hoc of this. Post hoc ergo, therefore because of this. So all of those things that you're concluding are, and we just see this over and over in science, right? They thought in the 50s, the rise of polio. So it was really interesting. It was like a really hot summer and whatever year in 1950 something. And they were looking at all the data, and they saw, well, there was an extraordinary amount of ice cream sold from ice cream trucks. Ice cream has dairy, and so they made a causal link between what was merely a correlation, that dairy was causing polio. So you're doing the same thing, but it appears to be like, first of all, what does that mean? Just something appears to you. It doesn't actually, that's a distinction between appearance and reality. Simply because something appears a certain way to you doesn't mean that it actually is. I mean, for crying out loud, I could pull out this pen here and be like, well, it appears it's a rubber made out of rubber, but it isn't. So appearance doesn't necessarily match reality. So you use these skeptical arguments, whether it's the brain in the vat. Nobody has been able to, and particularly externalists are extremely vulnerable to the skeptical. So they just hand wave. Well, it's skepticism ridiculous. Like, I don't have to answer. Like, but that's one of the critiques of externalism, is that, first of all, it just assumes what it wants to prove, and it can't, like, they're in the worst position when it comes to, because they're saying they have the problem of the other minds, they have the problem of the external world. None of those things can ever justify. Well, I just assume, let's just pretend it actually is true, then wouldn't it make my theory true? Yeah, but that's what's in question. You have to assume causality, that there's an external world, there's other minds, that you're not a brain in the vat, right? That's why Descartes, he's still wrong, but his type of internalism was not as vulnerable as externalism is. No, you don't have to. Here's what I like to see. The Orthodox Church is a body. Has a head, has arms, legs, and a feet, analogously. Does an eyes and a mouth. Do the eyes do what the mouth and the hands and the feet do? No, there's many parts. Now let me name some of the parts. There's the parts of the head, ultimately was Christ. But of this region, analogously, would be the bishops, the priests, and the deacons. Going down, parish council, and the different parts: cooks, cleaners, altar servers, cantors, the minor orders, reader and subdeacon, the singers. Okay, now suppose you walk in and you're like, every Orthodox church I've been to and every Greek or Serb fest, their food is awesome. Like, they've got the cooks. Whether it's baklava or Romanian meat or why am I blanking on the Serbian version of Mich is forgive me. And then you're an outsider and be like, well, obviously, do I have to be an amazing cook to be Orthodox? Then you go in and you hear amazing music, right, from the choir. And you're like, wow, I'm a terrible singer. Do I have to like be able to sing amazingly like this too? Then you see somebody that's like, well, they're always in here cleaning up, doing coffee hour and stuff. I just don't have enough time. Do I have to do that? Then you run into some philosophy professors. They're doing apologetics, and you run into some theologians too, and you're like, wow, do I have to be a philosopher to be Orthodox? Right? So each one is displaying the kingdom and talking about their orthodoxy and preaching in their own mode. These are the talents, and it's erroneous for you to look at any one of those like, do I have to do that? What I am talking about when, I'm a philosopher by profession. Professor, so that's what I got my degrees in. I use what I've been given to the glory of God. If you're an engineer, you're a cook, everything is taking, right, Eucharistically, you take the talents you're given, the gifts you're given, and what do? You put all your work and love into it, because that's a love offering, and you hand it back to God. Thine own of thine own. We thank you, Lord. That's Eucharistic. And in that, people see the gospel. They see the teachings of the church. It's erroneous to look at any one of those and be like, do I have to do that? It's like, no. Is there one part of all of it is an incarnational manifestation of the gospel and the teachings of Jesus Christ and the apostolic teachings. That's my answer. If you like music and you're like, I think I'd be good, then as the person said, go talk to your priest. They'll be like, hey, I have an interest and I think I might be good at this. Can I go through training, right? Hey, if you like philosophy, find this interesting, and you're like, hey, maybe one day I'd like to be an Orthodox philosopher. Well, there's a pathway to that. If you have the ability and talents to actually do something like that, your priest can recommend a pathway forward. Hey, I think I would be possibly good at theology. Maybe one day I'd even like to be, clergy. Well, there's a pathway for that. The priest might go, well, priest might tell you, I don't think you'd be good at it. I don't think it's for you. They might say, there might be a potential, let's send you off to seminary, something like that. So there's different modes, right? There's no one size fits all, because there's not one body part of the entire body. Does that make sense? I mean, how many people have been converted through food? Greek and Serb fests. God speaks in mysterious ways. He can speak through, be like, this food, this community is so awesome. We love, and it does. And then we give a tour during Serb Fest of the iconography in the church and get this. So it's all these different parts working. That's the witness. The best witness, though, is just to speak to somebody isn't arguments. It's a life transformed into Christ, and like the saints, those who made friends with the Lord. People see them and be like, whoa, that's not a system. That's beyond human explanation. There's something there. Oh, come, taste and see that the Lord is good. That's the best way. Why do I do arguments for philosophy? Well, first of all, I love truth. I like the rigor of thinking well, and it's what helps me refine my own thoughts. In terms of apologetics is not evangelism. Very rare that I have an actual philosophical, theological argument and win the person over. Apologetics is a defense. I'm defending the position that we received from the Lord who has revealed himself to us. Number two, notice when I went into the debate with Dr. Trent Dortry and Dr. Christopher Tomaswasi, I told him, like, I have no intention or expectations of presenting such an awesome argument that it just, like, demolished you and you were like, whoa, I just can't, it's so good. Have you ever seen something? So, like, it just doesn't happen. Not at the level of professional philosophers, right? And I said, mine's to defend my position. Did I rationally defend it? Did I do better than, like, did I get you to, at the end, admit that's actually possible? I think you might have a good project there. That's what he said. That's as good as you could hope for. I'm like, yeah, that's why I thought I won the debate. I'm like, that's what, that's as good as I could hope. But my real audience wasn't actually Trent and Christopher. It was the public. I'm like, I want you to see, right? That's why you often use philosophy and stuff like that. I'm like, well, to tear down strongholds, to show that the other system's foolish, and that ours can be rationally defended. Not everybody can do that. It takes years to get to the level where Jay and I are actually. So you don't have to do it. Most people can't, and most people shouldn't. That's why I'm not a proponent of debate culture. That it's become popular because it's just entertainment at this point. People aren't, neither the public nor the people debating, 90% of them, are philosophically trained to know what they're talking about. So they imitate. They just like, oh, that's a paradigm level. Right? There's easy things, because I remember this when I first started learning philosophy at 18. There were just easy tricks that I memorized that I could win most debates. Doesn't mean I knew what I was talking about. I was just parroting other arguments that I heard. And if you run into somebody that actually knows what they're talking about, like Christopher Tomaswski and Trent, they will demolish you. And then you will lose hope in the whole thing and fall and get blackpilled. That's usually what happens. So that's why I don't actually... And I can see it a lot of online content. People think, like, these people are so awesome. They're winning so many debates. It's like, I've been doing this long enough, and I'm like, it's not a great argument. They don't know what they're talking about. They're just parroting these... I saw somebody, like, put something in a syllogism that was literally formally invalid. And I'm like, see, like, nobody's going to get that. Like, most of the audience isn't going to see this. They don't know what they're doing. So... I don't recommend debate culture. Like, I think it's bad. I think it's entertainment, and people are gonna, with all entertainment, lose interest at some point. And then it's gonna make actual debate, logic, and philosophy just look retarded. Like, well, it's just, if you conceive of it as entertainment. I would never recommend, that's why I don't offer courses. And, look at all the courses, like, I offer. What I don't offer is debate courses. I'm not going to train you how to debate. Because that's years and years of studying philosophy. Like, you got to get degrees in philosophy to do, if you want to do it well. Otherwise, that responsibility's on me. Look at the type of people you're producing. So I'm like, most of you shouldn't be doing this. They're not capable. And you certainly don't have the time or training under your belt to. So, if you are interested, it's a long. Suppose you love like nuclear physics. You're like, you see some YouTube video on, nuclear fission. They're talking, and you're like, wow, that's incredible. I'd like to do that. Some guy on YouTube's like, well, you can sign up for my course, and you can do nuclear physics too and build your own reactor in your backyard. You see this as... It's like, no, you gotta first get a bachelor's in physics, right? You're gonna have to go to grad school, get a PhD. Like, That's going to take a long time. You can't just jump into something because it looks cool and you like it. Otherwise, it's danger. And danger, you're going to have a nuclear disaster on your... Oh my God! Oh, I'm ready. Can you imagine? Because you didn't know what you were doing. That's the same with philosophy and debate. You gotta train yourself and get to, you know. And even like the degrees is just, it doesn't mean that you're smart and you know what you're talking about. But again, it's kind of a litmus test. It's like, well, at least I have some objective data they did this work. Maybe they're totally retarded, and a lot of people are. And, you know, the university itself is a brainwashing institution. But then, you know, the other alternative of everybody on their own, just on the internet, is a worse option. So it's still, no matter how bad the university system is, it's still a lot better than no education or like formal education or systems of education whatsoever, and everyone for the every man for themselves on the internet to learn, and like that's even worse. So at least it gives me a kind of litmus test to be like, I cannot look at every person and analyze, like I was just talking about, and look at every single paper. Let's take an analogy where somebody's having a heart failure and needs a triple bypass. They're going to do heart surgery. And somebody says, I know how to do that. I love heart surgery. I love hearts, man. I love just getting in there and you're like, oh, really? Well, that's great. You know, maybe I'll hire you to, you know, work on my heart. I need a triple bypass surgery. And you're like, so where did you graduate medical school? Well, no, I didn't. I just researched all this stuff on my own and practiced on pig hearts. And would you be like, now here's the person I'm going to go with? They're like, well, look, just because you went to Harvard Medical School doesn't mean you know surgery. It's like, well, that's true, but like, are you going to risk it? Doesn't mean you're at least I have some objective evidence. I know this person went through the amount of work, you know, that I would want somebody to go through. Jay, are you there? This is funny. It's the same thing. It's like, I'm not going to encourage people to be like, well, learn debate on the internet. Now, somebody might anticipate, well, like, aren't you selling courses online? Like, yeah, but I'm a licensed professional. I actually have the like, these courses that I sell are all the courses I teach, right, at accredited colleges and universities that I worked at, but I'm currently working at. I just want to offer you for a lot cheaper price, right? I want to offer you a lot more, even. Like, I want to give you the office hours. I'm like, but this is actually what I do. I'm sanctioned to actually do this stuff. Patrick, the event donates $10. Are Orthodox theologians from Antiochian jurisdiction and Holy Trinity, i.e. Jordanville, good for older laymen wanting to... Yeah. I mean, I think it's good. So, like, yeah, I have a lot of good things to say about seminaries. That structure, rather than just trying to learn the stuff on, you know, by yourself online, you actually have professors there. You have syllabi. You have people who have degrees qualified to teach. It's accredited. You know, you have these, and then you get some type of documentary evidence that I went through this amount of, 3 hours a week for this course. Like, that's good. Now, can somebody do that apart from... Yeah, but, like... It's very difficult. And you just wouldn't have any external evidence to use a justification that, like, you know this, right? Other than just spending countless hours arguing with somebody and trying to prove, and it's like, that's just not worth it. And by the way, that's exactly why in undergrad I went to a great books program. I needed structure. If you look at the amount of reading, it's in, like, there's probably 0.00001% of society that could actually do that by themselves. And I'm like, no, I need to put myself purposely into a structure in which there's accountability, I'm graded. In fact, almost kind of a monastic community, because we were separated from, we were out in the woods. It was not co-ed, right? No TVs. The internet only had access if you went to the library for researching something. So all you did was read that. So I'm like, that's the sort of environment that I need to read that amount of material. And I need, even if the professors are not infallible, I need to entrust myself in somebody who is more qualified than I, that can guide me through this. That's one of the problems, too, of trying to do this all by your own. Like, there's no checks and balance. Like, there's nobody who's at a higher intellectual, experiential level of wisdom, even if they're wrong about stuff, that can help you out. Like, you're all on your own. And this is kind of the Plato's theory, paradox of knowledge. You're either ignorant or you know something. Premise 1. If you're ignorant, by definition, it means you don't have knowledge. So how are you going to recognize knowledge when you get it if you've never had it? You can't compare it and be like, oh, this is... To recognize is to think again. Recognize. That you have something to rethink. But it's the example I give is, if there's a fruit buffet of like 10 different fruits out there, 4 of which, like, you're familiar with: cantaloupe, grapes, strawberries. There's other ones that's like a kumquat, jackfruit, I don't know, like, suppose some exotic fruits that you've never heard of. And I'm like, yeah, I want you to go grab the jackfruit. Well, you've never seen or experienced or know what a jackfruit is. You know what cantaloupe, like, the best you could say is, well, it's not cantaloupe and strawberries and bananas or something like that. But I've never had it before, so I might pick up the kumquat thinking it's a jackfruit and come back. So if, in the analogy is the jackfruit's knowledge, even if I get it, I'm not going to recognize that it's knowledge. Even if something's true, I'm not going to... So this is kind of principle in terms of education, and why self-education is so disastrous. You're the ignorant. You're the sophomore. They're ignorant to the simpleton. You don't know what you're doing. Like, the internet just has a bunch of data. You don't know how... You don't have a methodology or heuristic to, like, well, how do I save time and sift through... If there's so much bad stuff, to see the good stuff, and I wouldn't know it's good because I don't actually possess knowledge for... You need a guide. Just with sports, education, all these analogies are similar. So that's what formal education's good for. It's not that it's impossible to be like... But again, all of those things I said hold true. Oh my gosh, it's 12:30. Let me see if there's any other super chats. Thank you, Patrick Thievon. Great question. I think it would be beneficial, especially those seminaries. Good stream today. Good discussion. Let's see what temperature it is. It has risen to 300 degrees, dude. Wow. 84 already. What was the high? At least it only goes up to... It says 88, but... At 3 p.m. Ew! Alright. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for your questions. Even the pushback. It's great. Thank you for support, your donations. Thank you, Crispy. And everybody on here that donated. Thank you for joining us. Prayers. I think I'm tomorrow. I'm gonna be gone for a couple of days, but I think I might be able to do tomorrow before I leave. So we'll just see. God bless you guys. May keep you and preserve you and grant you many, many years. Bye-bye.